Here is another video on calculating and we're going to use the information from the second scale drawing video, which was wall case 2. Use a lot of this information. Going off of our scale drawing is the best way to look at it, but we're going to also refer back to our vectors unit so we can use vector component addition, refer back to algebra when we looked at solving systems of equations by substitution in order to calculate what the stress on these supports would be. So let's make our three vectors really. First one is unknown, that's what we're solving for, but we do know the angle for the first one. It's 53 degrees. Our second vector, unknown, but the angle, well, if we start at 0 and we work our way around, we've gone beyond 180, another 48 degrees, so it's a matter of adding 180 and 48 degrees, which comes out to be 228 degrees. And then our third vector, our weight, we do have its magnitude. Its magnitude is 200 pounds for this one. Its angle, as mentioned before, is always 270 because it's always going in a straight down direction. So we've got our three vectors. Next thing to do is change them to rectangular coordinates. And so I'm going to multiply the cosine of 53 degrees. Hey, let me just clear this out for a second. There we go. Cosine of 53 degrees. Make sure your calculator is in degree mode. Is 0.60, and we'll go 3 places. So 602 times the magnitude, which is A. Then I'm going to take the sine of that same angle, which is 0.799, multiplied by the magnitude, which is A. Repeat that process for the information for vector B, which is the cosine of 228. We got a negative. It is in quadrant 3, so we should have gotten a negative 0.669 times B. And then the sine of 228, again, we should get a negative because x and y are both negative in quadrant 3. So negative 0.743 B. And we can go through the process, but again, I mentioned that you could realize what the coordinate will always be for the weight, but it would be 200 times the cosine of 270. Cosine at 270 is 0, therefore we get 0. And then 200 times the sine at 270, well, the sine at 270 is -1, so we get a negative 200. Now we take that information and we're going to write our system of equations. First equation is 0.602a minus 0.669b. We would add 0, no point in writing that down, and the sum of the forces in the x direction must be 0. Write our second equation, 0.799a. This time it's minus 0.743b. Then it's minus 200 is equal to sum of the forces in the y direction is equal to 0. I mentioned, though, you could take that shortcut and realize that every time you're going to move this constant value at the end to the other side, which changes it from a minus into a positive, and so it's just equal to 200. You'll also always solve the first equation for a, just as a rule of habit. So we've got 0.602A. I'm going to need to add 0.669B to both sides, so it makes it a positive 0.669B. Solve that for A, which means I divide both sides by 0.602. So I'm going to take 0.669 and divide it by 0.602. And I get 1.111 ... B. Actually, I mentioned in the last video, let's take that rounded to 4 places, because the only time we'll use a rounded value and not the entire decimal is right here with this. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to substitute that value in the place of A in the second equation. So with the entire value on my calculator, I'll just multiply that times 0.799. Then I'm going to subtract, because now this is no longer an A, it's in terms of B. I'll subtract, combine like terms, 0.743. So 0.14492 B equals 200. You can either make it the reciprocal and multiply it times 200, or you could take 200 and divide it by second answer and get that B is equal to 1380.02, what unit? Pounds, of course. And then I'm going to take this value, substitute it back in for A, back in for B to solve for A. So I'm going to take that number and multiply it times 1.1113. And I got that A was approximately 1,533.61 pounds. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, to be as close as we were wasn't going to happen again. And it is quite evident in this video because these values are way off. If I look back in this, A was 1,230, almost 1,231. My A here is 1,533, almost 1,534. B was 1,107, almost 1,108. This one's 1,380. Okay, they're not close, but they are close enough to know that it's accurate. Enjoy.